Hello, I'm Alex. I'm 22 and I live alone in a small rental house in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. Nothing fancy, just a neat little place with enough room for myself in a tiny yard where I can pretend I know how to garden. I moved here about 6 months ago, shortly after my girlfriend of 3 years decided we weren't right for each other anymore. Or to put it more accurately, she decided I wasn't right for her. Either way, it still stings a little. I'm not the type to dwell too much, though. My days are simple. Wake up, go to work, fixing sinks, leaky roofs, and broken windows around the neighborhood. I'm good at fixing things, and people around here seem to appreciate that. I'm the young handyman everyone calls when something minor goes wrong. It feels good to be needed, even if it's just for small stuff. One afternoon, as I was cleaning up my tools after a job, I heard a soft knock on my front door. It surprised me because I rarely had visitors. When I opened the door, I saw Sarah standing there, a neighbor that I had noticed a few times but never really spoken to. She was probably around 39 or 40, slender with soft brown hair and eyes that looked tired but still held a gentle warmth. She wore a casual blouse and jeans, simple but elegant, and there was something naturally graceful about her. Something quietly sad, too. "Hey, Alex," she said, her voice smooth and friendly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I've got a little problem at my house. I think my kitchen faucet is broken and my husband's at work tonight. Could you take a quick look?" I didn't hesitate. Helping people was second nature to me, and it wasn't like I had any other plans anyway. "Sure, Sarah," I said, smiling politely. "Let me grab my tools and I'll be right over." I walked across the street to her house, a neat, picture-perfect family home with neatly trimmed bushes and toys scattered lightly in the yard. Sarah opened the door wider to let me in, smiling gratefully. Inside, the place felt warm and comfortable, though a little too quiet for a family home. She led me into the kitchen and pointed at the faucet, which was steadily dripping. "I thought I could handle it," she said with a small laugh, "but I think I just made it worse." I smiled reassuringly. "No worries. I'll have it fixed in no time." While I knelt down and began inspecting the pipes beneath the sink, Sarah leaned against the counter beside me. She didn't say anything for a minute, just watching me quietly. When I glanced up, I noticed she seemed to be studying me more carefully than necessary. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave a quick, gentle smile that made me feel oddly self-conscious. "So," she said casually, breaking the silence, "how's your girlfriend doing? I used to see you two together all the time." The question caught me off guard, and my hand paused briefly on the wrench. "Oh, I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "We actually broke up not long ago." Sarah's eyebrows raised slightly in genuine surprise. "Oh, I'm sorry, that's tough," she said softly. Her voice had an almost soothing quality, and she spoke as if she'd experienced this type of thing herself more than once. "But honestly, girls your age nowadays probably don't even know how to hold on to a good man," she added with a faint, knowing smile. I chuckled nervously, unsure exactly how to take the comment. "Well, I guess things happened for a reason," I said vaguely, hoping to change the topic. She didn't reply right away, but I could feel her eyes lingering on me. Her presence felt heavier, more deliberate now, and I couldn't help but sense an underlying meaning in her words. "You know, Alex," Sarah finally said quietly, "you shouldn't let one bad experience put you off relationships completely. Sometimes the right person might be closer than you think." I finished tightening the valve beneath the sink and slowly stood up, turning to face her. Her gaze held mine for a long, quiet moment, and for a second I could have sworn she was about to say something more, but instead she just smiled warmly and stepped aside, giving me space to move away. "All fixed," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. Shouldn't give you any trouble now. She thanked me warmly and walked me to the door, her hand lightly touching my arm as I stepped out. I really appreciate your help, she said softly. You're a good guy, Alex. As I walked back to my house, tools in hand, I felt a strange mixture of flattery and unease. Sarah seemed nice, maybe a little lonely, but that conversation left me feeling confused. It was probably nothing I told myself, just harmless neighborly conversation. I was probably just reading too much into it, being overly sensitive after my breakup. But still that night, as I lay in bed, Sarah's lingering gaze kept replaying in my mind. It felt oddly personal, as though she was trying to tell me something more without actually saying it. Maybe it was nothing, but something deep inside me whispered that it definitely wasn't. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed loudly on the bedside table, jolting me awake. I rubbed my eyes and squinted at the screen, half expecting it to be a spam call or a wrong number. But it wasn't. Alex, sorry to bother you so late. Sarah's voice came through softly, tinged with embarrassment. Hey, Sarah, I answered, trying not to sound groggy. Everything all right? Not exactly, she sighed. My washing machine just started making an awful noise, and there's water leaking all over the laundry room. I don't want to ruin your sleep, but I really don't know what to do. I sat up in bed, suddenly alert. It's okay. I can come take a look. I'll be there in a minute. You're a lifesaver, she said with genuine relief. I quickly threw on some jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed my toolbox and walked briskly across the quiet street to Sarah's house. The neighborhood was peaceful, the air cool and crisp. Sarah was waiting for me at the front door, dressed in a soft, simple nightgown and a thin cardigan. Her hair was loosely tied back, and even in the dim porch light, I could see she looked both tired and vulnerable. Thanks so much for coming, she whispered, stepping aside to let me in. It's no problem, I reassured her. Let's take a look. We walked down the hallway into her laundry room, the house quiet except for the occasional drip of water and the faint hum of the refrigerator. The washing machine was indeed leaking a small pool forming on the tiled floor. I knelt down and started to examine the hoses and connections. Is it serious? Sarah asked softly, crouching beside me, her bare feet on the cold tile. Probably just a loose hose, I said, focusing on the machine to avoid noticing how close she was. I can fix it pretty quickly. You're amazing, she said, a smile in her voice. I began tightening the fittings, the task familiar and simple. Sarah stayed nearby, quietly observing my work. Her presence felt comforting and unsettling at the same time. After a minute, she spoke again, her tone softer than before. I hate being alone at night, she admitted quietly. With my husband always working late, it feels like I'm practically raising the kids by myself. I glanced at her briefly, then returned to my work. Sensing the conversation was about to become more personal than I had expected. That sounds tough, I responded gently, not sure what else to say. It is, she sighed. He's rarely home. Even when he is, it's like he's not really here. We barely speak, just routine talk about the kids or groceries. Sometimes I feel invisible. Her voice broke slightly at the end, and I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. I tightened the last bolt and paused, turning toward her slightly. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely meaning it. That sounds really hard. She managed a weak smile. Thanks for saying that. I don't usually talk about this stuff. Maybe it's because it's late and I'm tired, or maybe it's just because you're easy to talk to. I chuckled softly, feeling more at ease. Well, I'm glad I can help, whether it's the washing machine or just listening. She smiled again, this time a little brighter. You're good at both, Alex. I turned back to the machine, satisfied that the leak had stopped. There we go, all fixed. Let me get you a towel for your hands, she said quickly, moving to the small cabinet nearby. She returned with a soft towel, and as she handed it to me, her fingers brushed against mine. It was brief and accidental, but the gentle touch sent a quick, unexpected spark through me. Sorry, she murmured, withdrawing her hand slowly. It's okay, I said, my voice coming out quieter than I'd intended. We stood there for a moment in awkward silence, the quiet of the house amplifying every sound, every heartbeat. I should let you get back home, Sarah finally said, breaking the tension. I've kept you long enough. Right, I nodded, handing back the towel and gathering my tools. She walked me to the door, her steps slow and thoughtful. When we reached the porch, she paused, turning to face me in the dim glow of the streetlight. Thanks again, Alex, she said softly. I don't know what I'd do without you. I smiled gently, trying not to read too deeply into her words. Anytime, Sarah. I walked home slowly, the quiet neighborhood asleep around me. When I reached my front door, I hesitated for a moment, my hand on the knob. Something about tonight felt different, and I couldn't shake the subtle tension that lingered from Sarah's touch and her intimate confession. Inside my house, I lay awake for a long time, staring up at the dark ceiling. My mind replayed the evening repeatedly, the quiet vulnerability in Sarah's voice, the gentle brush of her hand against mine, and her soft admission of loneliness. Despite my rational efforts to dismiss these thoughts, they persisted, stirring complicated feelings I wasn't sure how to handle. This isn't good, I muttered to myself, turning over restlessly. I need to be careful. I knew I had to maintain boundaries, keep a respectful distance, and yet a quiet part of me recognized that Sarah had unintentionally stirred something deep inside. I sighed heavily, realizing that from this point on, interactions with her would be more complicated than just freely friendly exchanges between neighbors. For the first time, I questioned whether my willingness to help was inadvertently inviting trouble both for Sarah, Sir, and myself. As sleep finally overcame me, I resolved to be more careful. But despite my best intentions, I knew in my heart that keeping those boundaries clear might be easier said than done. A few days passed and life slowly returned to normal, or at least I tried to convince myself it had. I'd been careful to keep interactions with Sarah brief and polite. Nothing beyond a friendly wave across the street or a quick exchange about the weather. Still, the memory of our late-night encounter lingered in my mind, leaving me unsettled yet strangely curious. Late Friday afternoon, as I was finishing up some yard work, my phone buzzed with a text notification. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and glanced down. It was Sarah. Hey, Alex, hope you're well. The kids are at their grandparents' for the weekend and I'm cooking way too much food. Any chance you join me for dinner tonight? I stared at the message for a long moment, my heart suddenly thumping faster. The rational part of me knew I should decline politely and maintain the clear boundaries I'd promised myself. But another part of me felt reluctant to disappoint her, especially after seeing how lonely she'd been. I hesitated, my thumbs hovering uncertainly over the screen. Finally, I sighed, typing out my reply. That's really kind of you, Sarah, but I wouldn't want to impose. Her response came swiftly. You wouldn't be imposing. It'd be nice to have company, no pressure though. I paused again, conflicted, before replying. All right, I'll be over around 7. Perfect, came her simple reply. As the sun began to set, I showered, dressed casually, and walked slowly toward Sarah's house, each step heavier with nervous anticipation. She greeted me at the door wearing a soft white blouse and jeans, her hair neatly arranged. She looked refreshed and radiant, but her eyes still held the same subtle melancholy I'd grown accustomed to noticing. Hey, she smiled warmly. I'm glad you came. Thanks for inviting me, I said. trying to sound as relaxed as possible. The house was filled with the comforting aroma of roast chicken and baked potatoes. The dining table was set simply but carefully with candles flickering softly, adding warmth to the room. "You didn't have to go to so much trouble," I said, feeling slightly self-conscious. "It's no trouble," Sarah assured me gently. "It's nice to have someone to cook for. My kids usually just want pasta or pizza, and my husband—" She paused briefly, choosing her words carefully. "He rarely eats at home anyway." "I'm sorry," I said awkwardly, unsure what else to offer. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I've gotten used to it, maybe too used to it." We sat down to eat, the conversation flowing easily as we spoke about everyday things: my work, her children's school activities, neighborhood events. Sarah listened intently, occasionally laughing softly, her eyes brightening slightly each time she smiled. Eventually, as the meal came to a close and I helped her clear the dishes, Sarah's tone turned more thoughtful. "Can I ask you something personal, Alex?" I hesitated but nodded. "Sure." She leaned against the kitchen counter, drying her hands on a towel and looking at me with genuine curiosity. "What kind of woman really moves you? I mean, what do you look for when you think about a future partner?" The question caught me completely off guard, and I felt heat rise to my face. I quickly averted my gaze, fumbling for words. I guess someone kind, genuine, easy to talk to, someone who makes me feel comfortable and understood." She tilted her head, considering my words carefully. "That's sweet," she said softly, though there was a note of sadness in her voice. "Definitely not someone like me, then." My heart skipped and I looked up, startled by her words. "I didn't say that." Sarah smiled faintly, shaking her head slowly. "You didn't have to. It's okay. I understand." Before I could respond further, she stepped closer, gently placing her hand on my arm. Her voice lowered, becoming almost a whisper. "And Alex, please, you can just call me Sarah." My pulse quickened. The touch of her hand warmed through my sleeve. I stood frozen for a moment, painfully aware of how close she was standing. Her gaze held mine, vulnerable yet inviting, leaving no doubt about her feelings. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "Sarah, I really should get going." She slowly withdrew her hand, her expression gentle but understanding. "Of course, I don't want to keep you." We walked slowly to the front door in silence. When she opened it, the cool evening breeze felt like a relief against my flushed skin. "Thank you again for dinner," I managed to say, my voice sounding oddly strained. "It was wonderful." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," she said softly, leaning against the doorway. "Good night, Alex." "Good night, Sarah," I replied quietly, stepping outside. The short walk back home felt longer than usual, my mind spinning with confusion and conflicting emotions. As I entered my quiet house, I sank into my couch, letting out a deep breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "What am I doing?" I muttered to myself, burying my head in my hands. Sarah was clearly unhappy, lonely, seeking something her marriage lacked, and I'd just inadvertently become part of her emotional struggle. I knew it wasn't right. Crossing this line, any line, would lead nowhere good, especially considering Sarah's complicated situation. Yet I couldn't deny that something about her drew me in: her vulnerability, her quiet strength, her genuine warmth. It stirred feelings inside me I hadn't experienced in a long time, leaving me restless and troubled. That night, lying awake in bed, I stared blankly at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our dinner in my mind. Sarah's soft voice echoed again and again. "Definitely not someone like me, then." And her quiet request, "You can just call me Sarah." I knew clearly deep down that I was treading dangerously close to a line that should never be crossed. Yet, the harder I tried to push thoughts of Sarah away, the more persistent they became. She had awakened something in me, something complex and confusing. Closing my eyes, I made myself a promise to be more careful, to keep an emotional distance, to maintain boundaries and not let these complicated feelings get the better of me. But even as I made that vow, I couldn't escape the unsettling truth. I was beginning to see Sarah not just as my neighbor, but as someone whose presence I increasingly found hard to resist. The storm arrived suddenly, shaking the quiet suburban neighborhood with howling winds and pounding rain. I was in bed tossing restlessly, unable to sleep as Sarah's words from our dinner echoed in my mind when my phone rang sharply in the dark. I fumbled to pick it up, my pulse quickening when I saw Sarah's name flashing urgently on the screen. Alex! Her voice trembled, barely audible over the fierce sounds of the storm outside. I'm really sorry to bother you again, but the storm damaged part of the porch roof. Water's pouring in. I don't know what to do. It's all right, I replied immediately, sitting up and grabbing my jeans. I'll be right there. Within moments, I was heading through the raging storm toward Sarah's house. The rain battered my face cold and sharp, matching the chaos inside my heart. When I reached her porch, I could see exactly what she described. Water was pouring through a tear in the porch awning, pooling dangerously close to the front door. Sarah opened the door quickly, ushering me in from the relentless downpour. The house felt different tonight, shadowed and tense, lit only by a few scattered lamps and candles, as if she had anticipated losing power. Thank God you're here, Sarah whispered, visibly shaken. She wore a soft robe, her hair disheveled from the stress in the hour. Let me see what I can do, I said reassuringly, trying to ignore the rising tension inside my chest as I hurried back outside to temporarily patch the roof. After a few frantic minutes, the leak slowed to a manageable drip. I re-entered the house drenched in cold, and Sarah quickly handed me a towel. You're soaked, she said softly, concern heavy in her voice. I'm so sorry for calling you over again like this. Hey, it's okay, I assured her gently, drying my face. That's what neighbors are for, right? She nodded quietly, but her eyes revealed deeper emotions she couldn't hide. It seems I'm always needing your help lately. We stood in awkward silence, the house quiet except for the sound of rain thrashing against the windows. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out completely, plunging us into darkness. Sarah gasped softly, instinctively grabbing my arm, pulling herself close. I could feel her heart pounding, her slender form trembling slightly against me. It's okay, I whispered, barely audible over the storm. Probably just temporary. She didn't reply immediately, her breath coming in quick, anxious bursts. The intimacy of her closeness sent a surge of conflicting feelings through me. I could smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair, feel her soft warmth pressing lightly against my chest. My heart raced uncontrollably, my mind screaming warnings that were quickly drowned out by a deeper primal yearning. Alex, Sarah finally murmured, looking up at me, her face softly illuminated by the flickering candlelight nearby. Her eyes were wide, vulnerable, and searching mine desperately for answers. I'm scared. I don't know what's wrong with me. Every time you're near, I feel like everything might finally make sense. Sarah, I began hesitantly, my voice thick with emotion, uncertain of what to say or do. She stepped even closer, her voice trembling slightly as she whispered the words that turned my world upside down. If I were yours, you wouldn't have to leave like this. For a long, charged moment, neither of us moved. The storm raged louder, but the wind howling furiously outside, matching the storm building within us. Sarah's words hung in the air between us, heavy and full of meaning. Her hand rested gently on my chest, her eyes pleading silently for me to understand her loneliness, her pain, her need. My resolve teetered dangerously. Every instinct within me urged me to close the tiny gap between us, to pull her close and comfort her, to silence both our uncertainties. But the deeper part of me, the rational voice buried under layers of desire, reminded me of the line we stood so dangerously close to crossing. "Sarah," I said softly at last, gently taking her hands in mine, holding them just a moment longer before slowly stepping back. "You don't mean that. You're feeling alone, vulnerable. I understand, but I can't. I can't do that to you or to your family." Tears shimmered faintly in her eyes as she absorbed my words, nodding slowly with understanding and quiet resignation. "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm so sorry, Alex." "Don't be," I replied gently, managing a weak, reassuring smile. "We're both a little shaken up right now. Let's just take a breath, all right?" She nodded, and the brief tension slowly eased, replaced by sadness and unspoken regret. Neither of us said another word as I reached for my jacket and stepped toward the door. "Alex," she called softly just as I touched the door knob, stopping me in place. I turned to face her again, my heart aching at the fragile vulnerability etched across her face. "Thank you," she said quietly, meaning far more than just for my help with the roof. I nodded, unable to find the words to reply. Stepping outside into the still raging storm, I made my way home, slowly feeling the bitter cold of the rain soaking through me, numbing my skin but not the turmoil within. Inside my empty house, I peeled off my drenched clothing and sank onto the bed, exhausted physically and emotionally. I knew I had done the right thing, refusing to cross that line with Sarah. But it didn't ease the ache inside me, the confusion or the quiet longing I couldn't deny. Lying awake, listening to the storm fade into gentle rain, I wrestled with myself, feeling the weight of Sarah's words, her vulnerability, and the intensity of our moment in the dark. I had managed to step back, but only barely, and I knew the fragile boundary between us had become dangerously blurred. As the night wore on, sleep eluded me completely. I stared at the ceiling, replaying Sarah's words again and again, knowing I had narrowly passed a test I wasn't fully prepared for. But one truth remained clear. I couldn't let myself be tempted again, no matter how deeply I cared for her or how strongly my heart pulled me toward her. I knew we stood on a precipice. Closing my eyes, I made another silent promise to myself to remain strong, to keep that line intact. But in the quiet aftermath of the storm, I feared the hardest test was still yet to come. In the days following the storm, I found myself deliberately keeping my distance from Sarah. It wasn't easy. Our neighborhood was small, our lives interconnected. But I knew it was necessary. Whenever I saw her in her front yard, I quickly turned away, focusing instead on chores I'd been neglecting, or errands that took me out of the neighborhood. My heart sank each time I noticed her glancing toward my house, a subtle look of confusion and hurt on her face. Yet I was convinced this was for the best for both of us. Late one evening, while tidying up my bedroom, I reached into my jacket pocket, the same jacket I'd worn on the stormy night at Sarah's. My hand closed around something small and unfamiliar. Pulling it out, I discovered it was a small, weathered notebook. Confused, I flipped through the pages and quickly recognized Sarah's handwriting. My stomach twisted sharply. She must have accidentally slipped it into my pocket amidst the chaos of that night. I hesitated, knowing full well this wasn't mine to read, but curiosity and perhaps a deeper need to understand Sarah's behavior eventually overcame me. I sat down on my bed and opened it, carefully scanning the pages under the soft lamplight. The notebook was filled with Sarah's raw and unfiltered thoughts entries that spanned months, even years, chronicling the quiet misery of her marriage. Each page was a private revelation. Sarah's sadness, her loneliness, her deep sense of abandonment. One particular entry caught my eye and tightened my chest painfully. Tonight, he barely noticed me when he left for work again. It's like I'm invisible to him. The kids were already asleep and I just sat alone at the table wondering how long a person can feel this lonely before they simply disappear. I don't know how much longer I can bear this silence. Another entry further on read simply, I never thought I'd become this woman, lonely, needy, desperate for just a little attention. Am I selfish for wanting someone to notice me, to really see me? My heart ached as I read her words. Every sentence made me feel increasingly guilty and helpless. Here was a woman deeply hurt and profoundly isolated. A woman who had reached out to me, hoping to find a remedy for her pain. I realize more clearly now that Sarah was not a malicious person, nor was she deliberately trying to disrupt my life. She was merely trying, however, misguidedly to escape the emptiness that had consumed her. Feeling heavy, I closed the notebook carefully, setting it aside with respect and sadness. I sat in silence, my mind swirling with confusion and empathy. I knew I had to return the notebook, but the thought of seeing her again terrified me, afraid of what might happen if we found ourselves alone together. As if sensing my inner turmoil, my phone buzzed softly, startling me from my thoughts. I glanced down at the screen and saw Sarah's name flashing. My heart sped up nervously, but I forced myself to open her message. Alex, I'm so sorry for making you uncomfortable. It was unfair of me. Please don't avoid me. I promise I won't cross any more boundaries. I just really need a friend right now. I stared at her words, Feeling an ache spread through my chest. Sarah was being genuine, vulnerable, admitting her mistake openly. The sincerity in Harish words made me feel even worse about the distance I'd been maintaining. Still, I knew the danger of blurring our boundaries again. I wrestled with my response, typing and deleting several times before finally sending a careful message back. Sarah, it's okay. I understand. We'll talk soon. A few moments later, she replied simply, thank you. The notebook remained on my bedside table all night, silently reminding me of Sarah's inner battles. Sleep eluded me again. My thoughts tangled between compassion and caution, empathy and fear. The next morning, determined to end this complicated chapter, I gathered my courage and walked across the street. Sarah answered the door almost immediately, surprise flashing across her face, quickly replaced by embarrassment. Alex, she whispered softly. I wasn't expecting you. I found something of yours, I said gently, holding out the notebook. It must have slipped into my jacket pocket during the storm. Her face turned pale as she recognized the journal lies, widening in sudden panic. Oh God, Alex, did you... I'm sorry, I interrupted quietly, my voice calm and steady. I read a little. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. I just wanted to understand. Her cheeks' ringed eyes shimmering as she looked down, clearly ashamed. You must think I'm pathetic. No, I replied firmly, taking a deep breath. I think you're human. You're hurting Sarah. I see that now clearer than ever. But we can't fix this by making things more complicated. She nodded slowly, tears beginning to escape quietly down her cheeks. I never meant for any of this to happen, I swear. I know, I assured her softly, resisting the urge to comfort her physically. I get it, but you have a family, Sarah, a husband, children who need you. Whatever problems you have, whatever loneliness you're feeling, you need to face it directly with him, not with me. She wiped her tears away quietly, her voice shaky but steady. You're right. I've been selfish, unfair to you, unfair to myself. I'm so sorry, Alex. You don't have to apologize, I said gently, offering her a small, comforting smile. I understand why this happened. You're a good person, Sarah. You deserve happiness and peace, but this isn't the right way. She looked at me with quiet admiration, managing a fragile smile. You're very wise for your age. I wish I'd had your clarity. We stood quietly for a moment, the unspoken understanding passing between us. Finally, I stepped back slightly, breaking the intimacy of the moment. I should get going, I said softly. Take care of yourself, Sarah. You too, Alex, she whispered, holding the notebook tightly to her chest. And thank you. As I walked away from her porch, my heart heavy but resolute. I knew I'd done the right thing, even if it hurt. Sarah was not a villain. She was simply lost, lonely, and wounded. But I also understood that stepping away was the best, most compassionate thing I could do for both of us. I returned home, closing my door softly behind me, feeling a bittersweet sense of relief. I had finally chosen a clear path, one defined by respect, compassion, and necessary boundaries. And even though that ache in my chest remained, I knew with absolute certainty it was the only choice I could have made. A few days passed quietly after returning Sarah's notebook each day, bringing a greater sense of peace and clarity. The weight of uncertainty had finally lifted from my shoulders, and I knew it was time to face Sarah one last time, to speak honestly about the boundaries we had nearly crossed. It was a cool, sunny afternoon when I finally gathered enough courage to cross the street and knock softly on Sarah's front door. My heart was steady, my mind clear. I knew exactly what needed to be said, even though I wasn't sure how she'd react. Sarah answered the door quietly, looking subdued yet composed. Her eyes held a sense of cautious uncertainty as she stepped back silently, inviting me inside. Thanks for seeing me, I began softly, following her into the familiar warmth of her living room. She nodded, motioning for me to sit down on the couch while she took a chair opposite me, hands nervously clasped in her lap. You don't need to thank me, she said quietly, her voice gentle after everything that's happened. I understand we both need to talk. I nodded slowly, gathering my thoughts carefully. Sarah, I want you to know I don't regret helping you, being there when you needed someone. But what happened between us, or almost happened, it's something we both know shouldn't have. She lowered her gaze, clearly embarrassed, yet understanding the truth in my words. I know, Alex, believe me, I know I crossed a line. I was unfair to you. No, I corrected gently, shaking my head. We both made choices, but the important thing now is to understand why it happened. Sarah looked up at me again, her eyes filled with quiet desperation. I'm not a bad person, Alex, I swear. I'm just so tired of being alone, feeling unwanted and invisible. I know you're not bad, I assured her softly. You're human, you're hurting, and I completely understand that feeling. Loneliness can make us act in ways we normally wouldn't. She sighed deeply, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I never meant to drag you into my problems. You deserve better than that. You deserve better too, I said firmly, leaning forward slightly, keeping my voice steady and clear. But I'm not the answer to your loneliness, Sarah. I'm not the solution you're seeking. Running away or distracting yourself from your marriage problems will only create more pain. She nodded slowly, absorbing my words, her eyes thoughtful and somber. You're right. I've spent so long hiding from reality that I don't even recognize myself anymore. You can't keep running, I told her gently, my voice filled with empathy. You need to face this directly with your husband. You need to talk openly about how you feel, even if it's painful and uncomfortable. Sarah wiped her tears away, quietly nodding as though the truth of my words was finally sinking in. I'm scared, she admitted softly. What if he doesn't care? What if nothing changes? You won't know until you try, I reminded her gently, and even if things don't change the way you hope, at least you'll know you were brave enough to try to be honest, to face the truth. For the first time, a tiny, fragile smile appeared on her lips. You're wise beyond your years, Alex. Sometimes I wonder who's really the grown-up between us. I chuckled softly, shaking my head. I've just had to learn things the hard way, too. But I'm grateful that our paths crossed. You've taught me a lot. She looked at me with quiet appreciation, her eyes warm with genuine gratitude. And you've taught me even more. You've woken me up. Alex made me see how lost I'd become. I'm sorry for everything. You don't owe me an apology, I replied gently, my voice firm but compassionate. We both learned from this, and that's what's important. Sarah nodded slowly, her breathing steadying as she finally seemed to accept what needed to be done. We sat quietly for a few more moments, allowing the calm to settle between us, filling the space where tension had once been. Finally, I stood up slowly, signaling the end of our conversation. Sarah stood as well, her expression peaceful but bittersweet. Thank you, she whispered softly, stepping closer and gently touching my arm. Thank you for everything, your kindness, your understanding, and your honesty. You're welcome, I said sincerely, feeling a profound sense of relief. Please remember, Sarah, you're stronger than you realize. She smiled softly, nodding. I promise I'll remember. With a final respectful nod, I turned and stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind me. As I walked home across the quiet street, a deep calm spread through me. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely free, unburdened, at peace with the choices I'd made. The weeks passed quietly after that, returning life to its normal rhythm. I occasionally saw Sarah around the neighborhood, and we exchanged friendly but distant waves, both of us quietly acknowledging their respectful distance now firmly established between us. About a month later, as I returned home from work, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. I recognized Sarah's handwriting immediately. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it carefully and read the short note it cheated. Dear Alex, I finally took your advice and talked openly with my husband. It was painful and messy, but it was honest. We're trying our best to rebuild, to find our way back to each other. It won't be easy, but we're both committed to trying. I owe so much of this decision to you and your unwavering kindness. Thank you, Alex. You've shown me what true kindness looks like, and I'll never forget that. Please take care of yourself, and I wish you every happiness. Sincerely, Sarah. I stood quietly for a long moment, rereading her words, feeling a wave of relief and gratitude wash over me. I folded the letter gently, slipping it into my pocket with a peaceful smile. Walking inside my home, I realized something important. The greatest kindness we can show someone isn't always about stepping in to fix their problems. It's about helping them find the courage and strength to face their own battles. Sarah had found her way back to herself, and I'd found clarity and peace in knowing I had done the right thing. As I closed my front door behind me, a quiet sense of pride and fulfillment filled my heart. Sarah and I had both grown from this experience, each of us understanding ourselves a little better, each finding where we truly belonged. And in that quiet moment of reflection, I knew without a doubt, sometimes kindness truly means stepping back, letting others find their own path, and trusting that each of us has the strength to discover where we belong. In the serene shadows of Alex's narrative, where a young handyman's gentle heart collides with a neighbor's hidden anguish, unfolds a profound life lesson that echoes through our own fragile existences. True kindness isn't always the immediate embrace or the quick fix. It's the quiet strength to withdraw, granting space for others to reclaim their shattered worlds. Alex, still mending from lost love, navigates Sarah's marital void, their encounters laced with electric vulnerability and unspoken desires. Yet by resisting temptation, returning her raw journal and guiding her toward raw confrontation, he teaches us that healing blooms not from escape, but from facing the abyss head-on. This tale grips the soul, a raw reminder of how loneliness can seduce us toward perilous edges, only for wisdom to pull us back, preserving dignity amid chaos. It whispers urgently, in life's tangled webs of connection, choose boundaries that nurture growth, transforming pain into purpose and isolation into empowerment. If this story stirred echoes of your own battles with boundaries and bravery, share your heartfelt experiences in the comments. What's the hardest line you've drawn? Your vulnerability could spark hope for another. Craving more emotional journeys that unravel life's deepest truths? Smash that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join our community where raw stories forge unbreakable bonds. Let's inspire together.